the big trade that just broke while I was doing a French test this afternoon, and it is Jake McCabe and what's his name?
Sam
Sam
Lafferty.
Lafferty to and a bunch of other pieces which we'll get to. You know what? Let me just say it right now. It is Jake McCabe, Sam Lafferty, um, a conditional fifth round pick from 2024, a conditional fifth round pick from 2025, and in exchange for a conditional first rounder from 2025, which the condition is it's top 10 protected, second rounder from 2026, forward Joey Anderson, and forward Pavel Gogolev going to the Blackhawks. So, initial thoughts, Ryan?
I mean, oh, brilliant trade. Dubas masterclass. Um, Admittedly, the last time I said that, Jared McCann went straight to Seattle in the expansion draft. But guess what? We don't have to worry about that this time because these two guys are here to stay.
Yep.
Um, I mean, I think if you look at the trade that Tampa Bay made for Tanner Jeannot, and a huge part of it was, I was talking to some people and they said, "Oh, Tampa does this all the time, right?" And the reason they gave up so much is because Jeannot's young and they're gonna get him long term. They're gonna get him for more than just this year because they have his RFA rights. Well, Toronto has given up less, and they've gotten two pieces that I would argue at least McCabe is better than Jeannot,
Oh yeah.
and the Leafs also have them on term, right? Lafferty for one more season after this one, and McCabe for two more after this season. And especially with
The
one of
retention.
the piece, the retention on McCabe. I mentioned this in our last video. It's basically as if you take Justin Hall, who's probably going to get a bit of a raise, and you're replacing him with Jake McCabe, who's a better player, who's logged very good numbers on Chicago in really a terrible situation. He's been Chicago's best defenseman this season, and now he's going to be playing high leverage moments with a much better surrounding cast. So definitely, I think, and to not give up any of the top prospects in our system. I mean, like I think Steve Dangle mentioned this, but the fact that Kyle Dubas has gotten Ryan O'Reilly, Jake McCabe, Noah Chari, and Sam Lafferty, and not given up a single like B to A tier prospect in the process is just crazy to me.
Yeah.
Out ridiculous.
It's extremely impressive because this is Jake McCabe. He is gonna fit in on probably what's the Leafs' third pair, and man, he is a really good third pair defenseman. Considering where he was playing in Chicago, he was still like a positive player, and even this year his offensive numbers have gone up. He's having a career year when it comes to offense, even though he's considered to be a defensive defenseman. He's got like 20 points in 52 games, and his career high is like 22, I think. So
Oh wow.
so he's having a career year when it comes to offense. Obviously, it's not an insane amount, but for someone that you would consider to like never score, this guy's doing a pretty good job, and you can see that on the chart here where his offensive numbers have gone up this season compared to the last, and his defensive numbers too. So he's just having an overall pretty good year, and I think that uh, if he's put into the right situations, which I think he will be, which we'll get to in a second, on Toronto, he's going to be given a chance to thrive and get even better. And considering that his cap hit is 2 million for the next 3 seasons, 2.5 seasons, he's on a pretty good deal. And considering the return was only like a conditional first, which first of all, even if the Leafs end up like dropping off the cliff and falling into a like bottom 10 position, they still get that pick, which probably won't happen. But um,
Knock on wood.
yeah, knock on wood, right? And Pavel Gogolev is a prospect that I've actually liked for a while, but to be honest, he's taken his time, and he's not really. I really don't see him starting against anything more than like a bottom six player. And on the Leafs, I don't see him like cracking the lineup at all ever. So maybe he stands a chance in
Yeah.
Chicago, but I'm not mad that that was given up. And Joey Anderson has been in and out of the lineup. I feel like he's been good, but at the same time, if he's been moved, we know that Kyle Dubas likes to do right by his players, and he found that Anderson wasn't really getting a spot on the team, so he moved him out to a place where he'll definitely play, and he'll be appreciated more. So I think it's a in that case it's a win-win, but like it really isn't because I feel like that is not even close to enough value. And I was apprehensive in the as you can see in the last video where I was like, I don't know if this guy can fill the role that we need. And turns out he can. He can play the right side. And oh, there's a mosquito flying around my room. That's annoying. And this just broke my train of thought.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I mean,
yeah, you go ahead.
yeah, I mean, the thing with Jake McCabe is I'm not even certain that he's gonna play third pair. I think he's good enough to play second, even for he might play with Morgan Riley, if we're
Maybe.
being honest, because we've seen Brody and Riley have taken a little bit of a step back. Keith's tried Justin Hall on a pair with Morgan
Oh
Riley
no.
just earlier this week. We've seen Sandine play with Riley. Clearly they're it's we talked like last year and the year before that how Brody was supposed to be that stabilizing force and be like, oh, Mo finally has his partner. It's been a little bit shaky this season. They've been moving them around. I think McCabe might be an outside shot to play with Morgan Riley, and if not, you keep Brody there. you know
Liljegren's also an option. He's been really good.
yep, the other guy could play up there, but I think realistically, because the Leafs have a couple of young defensemen, Sandine and Liljegren, I think it would be a really good idea to pair those two young guys up with an older veteran. So I'm thinking probably Morgan Riley with Brody, and then you got Sandine with McCabe, and then Giordano with Liljegren, and then you have Hall and Timmins on the outside looking in. Um, so from that aspect, I think boom, incredible. And I think another really underrated aspect is I think we've found like our penalty killing units, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
I think the way that Dubas has made these trades is Achari can penalty kill. He's not amazing at it, but he can penalty kill. Lafferty's been one of the best penalty killers in hockey this season. Mitchell Marner, we know, is a great penalty killer. David Kampf is a great penalty killer. Ryan O'Reilly is a great penalty killer. And then we have really defensively, I mean, Giordano's going to be on the penalty kill. McCabe's going to be on the penalty kill. And now you have Justin Hall, who's probably going to be on the penalty kill if he's in the lineup. And then probably Liljegren, right? So those four, right, are going to be locked in penalty kill slots. Um, but what I think is really interesting is how this blue line is going to shape up because as much as what I outlined earlier is what I want to happen with Sandine and McCabe, I'm not sure that's what the Leafs are going to do. We know that Sheldon has a affinity towards Justin Hall,
It's sad though.
and refuses to take him out of the lineup. And if that is the case, then the odd man out, Sandine, and Sandine's been the odd man out the last couple of years when the Leafs have brought guys in, right?
Well, it
And
was Liljegren last year though. Hall was taken out. Hall was put in for Liljegren.
yeah. But I mean, the way Liljegren's played
Yeah,
this
you
year,
can't take him out.
if he gets taken out of the lineup, fire Sheldon Keefe.
On
Like,
God.
if the playoffs start and Liljegren is not in the starting lineup, like, or not starting lineup, but on the opening night roster, like, fire Sheldon Keefe. Like, there's no way Liljegren's outperformed Sandine this season, and it's just a fact, right? But if Sandine is the odd man looking out, right? And Justin Hall's in. So you have Sandine and Timmins on the bench. Question arises. We know last offseason, Rasmus Sandin took forever to get his contract extension signed. Why? Because he didn't think that there was an opportunity for him to play on this team. He looked at the left side of that defense with Morgan Riley, Jake Muzzin, and Mark Giordano and thought, I'm not getting playing time. And I don't know if I want to sign a contract if, I don't have an opportunity to play games. Now with this McCabe deal, we know McCabe's going to be here for at least 2 more seasons. Gio is locked in for next season. Hall's the only one out. Liljegren is under contract. Riley is under contract. Brody's under contract. Like, where does Sandine fit? And I think that there is an outside shot because we know Alexander Kerfoot is going to get moved, probably, right? There's interest in Vancouver from him. I do wonder if there is a world where Dubas has done an amazing job so far, not moving roster players and top prospects, right? But I do wonder Toronto if Toronto wants to deploy the three-head monster down the middle, in Matthews, Tavares, and O'Reilly. They need one more winger who can generate something offensively on the left wing of either the second line or third line, wherever you choose to play him, right? And I think with Vancouver, very busy the last today and yesterday, right? There's rumblings that something might happen with JT Miller. It looks like Vancouver's up to something. I would be really interested to see if there was some sort of Kerfoot Sandine combination that could get us Brock Besser with retention for the next 3 years. Um, because like McCabe, he's got 2 more years after this one. If we can get him for around $3.3 million, right, that solves the whole Bunting issue. If Michael Bunting goes to free agency, Besser's a guy who can step into that first line, right? We don't have to worry about paying Michael Bunting $4 or $5 million, and on top of that, he's on pace sneakily for 60 points this year. It's not like he's been a scrub this season for Vancouver,
Mm-hmm.
and I think especially with Vancouver, they need young players. They need young NHL ready players, and they don't really have anyone on that blue line. And Rasmussen, they showed they took a flyer on Dermott last year from Toronto. I think it would hurt me. I don't want Sandine to get traded, right? But in a world where Sean Keefe probably won't play Sandine over Hall in the playoffs, right? How good is a 22-year-old going to be sitting on our bench for the next 2 seasons? Because it's not just going to be this season, this playoffs. Sandine probably won't crack the roster next year either, with McCabe, Brody, Riley, and Giordano. You know what I
I
mean? And Liljegren, right? Like,
I don't know. I feel
I'm
like
interested.
Sandine could definitely earn a spot over Giordano at least, but I do agree that where Sandine is starting to like he was apprehensive at the beginning of the season. At this point now where he's injured now and he's started to see his spot being taken that he might want to move, and Dubas will respect that, especially since he's worth a lot. But
Yeah,
at the
and
same yeah, go ahead.
mhm. No, you go, you go, you go, you go.
At the same time though, I feel like okay. So Hall's in his last year, obviously, and if McCabe comes in and he plays the same role that Hall is supposed to play, like, what does Hall do at that point, right? He's your penalty killer, I guess, but you have your fifth. That's like a fifth defenseman that penalty kills. Um, you don't have another guy who plays on the power play. Well, Liljegren does, but he's not really a quarterback. I think Sandine is probably gonna get that spot. I really hope he does when he gets back, and Keefe isn't an idiot. But um, I in my opinion, I really don't think that Hall is gonna get that spot over Sandine. But we'll see.
The
Obviously,
thing is, Sandine did play today. I mean yesterday against Seattle, so he is already back. They tried him with Morgan Riley actually, for stretches of the
oh yeah,
game.
I didn't even notice
But the
that.
thing is, Giordano was on the power play too, right?
Oh, Giordano
And
was
that's
on the
the
power.
lefty.
Yeah, I didn't even watch that game. So
Gio's been on the power play too almost the entire season. He's been the guy, and obviously next season, sure, Sandine could take the third pair left defense spot from Gio. The only thing is, Giordano signed a 2-year, $800,000 extension with Toronto last season, and in terms of setting a precedent, right? With Wayne Simmons, is because he's not good enough to play anymore, right? But if Giordano, who's still playing like he's 32 years old and not 39 years old, if next season he's still playing well, and then all of a sudden you take him out of the lineup, you stick him in the press box for the entire season, doesn't set a great precedent for future veterans from Toronto who might think, hey, I want to win a cup with Toronto. I want to come back to my hometown team, if they see that Toronto's going to bench a guy like Gio, right? Who has a lot of cachet in this league. Um, of course, I think Sandine can learn to play on the right, and maybe that's his way to stick in the lineup. But the thing is with Toronto, right? If you take McCabe, Giordano, and Brody as your penalty killers, right? And Liljegren, right? The one thing is you can never have too many penalty killers, and defensive guys, especially when you're playing teams like Boston and Tampa Bay. And that's why I think Keefe might lean towards Hall, because he trusts Hall. He trusts Hall in high leverage situations. Whether or not he should is a different story, but he does. Right? We see Hall out on the penalty kill. We saw him with Muzzin as the defensive pairing guy for like 2 seasons in a row. Right? clearly Keith trusts this guy, and I know he's expiring, and his role may be redundant, but I think even if Hall is your seventh defenseman and you want to play like a guy like Timmins, right? If you want some more offensive minded guy, Toronto has some options, and I just can't see them holding eight defensemen when all eight of them should be playing
Yeah.
any meaningful NHL minutes, right? I feel like someone has to go. And the easy thing is just to move Hall and Kerfoot, right? But something just tells me that Keith loves this guy. And I don't know if Dubas is going to move him. And if that's the case, Timmins they just gave an extension to, so they're not going to move him. That leaves only one guy. As much as it pains me to say, because he's only 22 years old and he's shown a lot of flashes for this team.
Yeah. So okay. Well, the Leafs play tomorrow, I think, if I'm not wrong. So I don't even know
Probably.
actually. Okay. Well, they'll play in the next 2 days. Probably
I think they're
tomorrow.
playing Minnesota. Oh, they're playing the Oilers on the first, so Wednesday. They
Oh,
don't
that's a
play tomorrow. They play 2 days from now.
okay. So they play 2 days. We'll see what Keith does. McCabe will probably be playing that game if I had to guess. Um, I think if we see that Hall comes out of the lineup, I think that shows that he's at least willing to do it. If he sees that Sandin is struggling, then that's then Sandin kind of lost a spot for himself. But I really doubt that will happen because he's been like chewing up bottom pair minutes, and he's just like insane at that. So um, and it's another chart that I saw on JFresh actually. Let me find it. Uh, where I don't actually know, but like Sandin's been like completely chewing up bottom pairing minutes, and if he sticks in the lineup after that game, which I do believe he'll probably try at least, Keith will probably try to play him in. Um, then we'll have an answer as to what happens in the playoffs. But I don't. But if he does waver a bit, then obviously you lose the. Um, yeah, this is the one right here. You lose the. You lose Sandin, and Hall has to go in. Um, Ideally, it would be these pairings that uh, or something like this that J Fresh just put: Riley Brody,
I
Sandin
agree.
McCabe,
Yeah,
Giordano
that
Liljegren.
is ideal. That would be ideal.
And if everyone plays to their like ability, which we know, like Liljegren, Sandin, Giordano Liljegren has been a very good pairing for a while. Brody and
Right.
Riley have shown flashes. This year they've been iffy, and I think them being like injured in stints has really not helped them either.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
and then Sandin and McCabe will have to see, but Hall is also an asset, a really big asset actually. Right-handed defenseman at $2 million that can easily fit into like pretty much any defensive lineup because the reason he can't find us we're having this conversation now is because the Leafs have so many options. It's so deep, but a lot of teams aren't like that. Any contending team would look at Hall and be like, you know what, that's probably someone that can fit in our right side because that's where a lot of teams are weak. But um, so if Hall gets shopped, I think there will be buyers, and if Kerfoot gets shopped, there seems to already be a buyer in Vancouver. And we talked about Besser. I was also thinking that I wasn't actually thinking that Sandin would get moved. I was thinking that somehow we'd if someone would come back from Vancouver, it'd be Garland. So
Hmm.
uh
Garland would be a great fit too.
yeah,
I'm just wondering how would a Kerfoot Garland swap be possible without giving up another asset, right?
yeah,
Because if you're taking Sandine out, right? Vancouver is not exactly in a playoff push mentality right now, so Justin Hall doesn't really mean anything to them.
yeah.
So he might as well just not be in the deal. You
So
might as
it
well
does.
not trade him,
Yeah, you
right?
have to move a draft pick or a prospect at that point. So that's where it gets
But the
more.
thing is, Toronto doesn't have any more draft picks,
Yeah,
right?
so it has to
So
be a
are we
prospect.
talking Roni Hirvonen, right? Is that something that would? But I really like Roni Hirvonen. I think he could be a Leaf in 2 years' time, 2 3 years, right? Um, and I think Toronto really likes their current crop of prospects, which is why they refrained from trading any of them. They've hit on a lot of prospects over the last 3 seasons, so it would be a little bit of a it would hurt a little bit to have to take from that treasure trove. I do wonder, speaking of Justin Hall, and you're talking about how contenders could look at him as a very valuable defensive defenseman. we have a fellow member of the podcast who supports a team in the Western Conference, whose team has been very below average defensively
Oh.
this season, who could use a right-handed defenseman. Um, Now, of course, they already have former Leaf Cody Ceci and Tyson Berry on that right side. Why not complete the trifecta by adding Justin Hall? Um,
Just like,
and the thing with the Oilers is they have a couple of interesting young guys who have fallen out of favor in the lineup. A guy like Jesse Puljujarvi or Kyler Yamamoto, right? I would be very intrigued if Toronto were to offer a one for one swap, Yamamoto for Hall,
ooh.
a need for a need, right? Yamamoto has struggled since his rookie season with Edmonton. Injuries and playing consistency has hampered his performance, but he's a guy where I think his contract. If let me check Edmonton's cap friendly right now. If if I remember correctly, he's got 3.1 for the next 2 seasons. So assuming that, there's like a Kerfoot move in there, right? Or like Toronto's like offloading some salary. I'm just saying like a potential swap, a like for like kind of like, or maybe JP would probably be a better pick, maybe because he only has 1 year left, and Toronto could probably re-sign him for cheap. But maybe a JP for Hall one for one deal, right? Toronto needs a forward with some upside, um, and Edmonton needs a steady defenseman.
Yeah, that's
Shea would
really.
probably slap me for suggesting this, but
Nah, it's really interesting actually, because I don't think even if you ask Shay now, he knows that Justin Hall's not great, but he would be an upgrade for that right side in Edmonton, I think. And would he be actually? I actually don't know.
you it'd be. I'm not sure actually because they do have CC and
She's
Bouchard on the
yeah,
right,
Bouchard.
and
That's the
and
one that
and Barry,
was
right? So those three guys, right?
yeah,
So
Bouchard's
maybe
really
Hall
good.
wouldn't necessarily slot in there. But to be fair, if Edmonton is running the seven defensemen that they have been with Vincent Desharnais,
Oh, true, true,
right?
true.
CC as a seventh defenseman instead of Desharnais, a little bit more playoff pedigree, more experience playing heavy minutes. Um, and Edmonton loves digging into that Toronto well for some reason.
Just take away all our throwaways. And honestly,
Yeah,
I wouldn't like. Okay, look. So the Leafs are obviously the ones that are taking the bigger risk here. Hall is something a lot more surefire because he's been consistent at a certain point for a while now. JP is definitely more of a flyer. Even Kyler Yamamoto is definitely more of a flyer on for the Leafs to take. But at the same time, it's a risk they can take if they play him with in the top any of them in the top six or even top nine, and they are performing. Wow, you hit, good job. But if it isn't, the Leafs have so many options where it doesn't really matter. I mean, it does matter. You would rather have it than not, but you could easily replace that with anyone that you have now because we haven't even talked about Sam Lafferty that much, and he's gonna be a not he's gonna be a good part of the bottom six in the Leafs now too. So yeah, it's definitely an option. And Kerfoot and Hall are both interesting players for a lot of teams because they are versatile. They can play up and down the lineup, and they are decent defensively. Kerfoot's decent defensively. His offense has a bit more to be desired, but like it's there. It has potential to be there. He's very versatile. Hall is very good defensively. He has shown spurts of offensive talent that we saw at the beginning of his career. Not as much now, but it's still there. So it's a lot of contending teams could look at those two players and would be willing to even if it's just to like replenish the draft pick pool or something like that. There's a lot of value that can come from contending teams willing to get those two players. So
yeah. I think a great fit would be actually Calgary. I think Calgary could use both of them, and if Calgary is willing to give up a pretty pick or two for these guys, I wouldn't hate it, right? Because you look at Calgary's defense: Hannafin, Anderson, Tanev, Zadorov, Uyghur. Those five guys definitely gonna play, right? But that sixth spot, you got Connor McKay, who's a good player, 26 years old, but Justin Hall probably an upgrade, right? And you look at that top nine, we know about Calgary's offensive struggles this season. I think Kerfoot could work his way into that forward group, right? Kadri, Huberdeau, Mangiapane, Backlund, Coleman, Lindholm, Toffoli, Dubé. Those are 8 guys. I think Kerfoot could take that third line role where he'd be able to get consistent third line minutes and not bump around the fourth line and to the third line to the second line back to the fourth line. He might have some consistency and that might help his game.
Yeah.
So I think Calgary could be a really interesting situation as well. They have $3.5 million in cap space, so maybe if they give a contract back that Toronto could be interested in. Um, to make it work. I don't know, but definitely very interested to see what Dubas does with those two players.
And that's where like the cap situation comes in for Toronto, because right now they have 2,770,000, and that is still because Matt Murray is on LTIR, so some of his LTIR space is being used right now, about half of it. No,
Yeah,
less than half of it, more than half of it. Sorry, no,
yeah. I mean,
less than half. He's 4.5.
well, his contract is like 4.6 mil, so a little bit
So
less than, so a little bit more than half.
yeah, more than half. So if the release like Murray's been skating, and it looks like he's around ready to play. His date to come back is February 28th, which is tomorrow. Um, and right now, if the Leafs move one of, not one of, it'd have to be Hall. Okay, Hall is not enough, but if they move Kerfoot, that immediately clears up the space, unless they obviously bring back another asset. If they move both of them, that's more than enough space. Um, So if the Leafs do want to start playing Murray earlier, which I think they do, because while Samsonov has been great, he's never had that much playoff success. While on the other hand, Matt Murray is a bona fide two-time Stanley Cup champion.
Stanley Cup champ.
Yeah, so there's that experience factor there too. But I do think that if the Leafs are trying to bring back Murray, which they should be trying to do in my opinion, then they've got to make
Oh
these
yeah,
two moves soon. Obviously, the deadline is on Friday, so it doesn't exactly give them a lot of time. But it looks like things are already in the works, and it's not exactly a complicated trade to make if it's just moving off Kerfoot or Hall for picks either. So if it needs to happen, it'll
yeah. I think
happen.
it's just finding the right partner and maximizing what you can get for those two guys.
Yeah.
I think a player that also could get moved is maybe Engvall because his cap hit would be enough, 2.25 for 1 year. Walking
Yeah.
him straight to unrestricted free agency. I think they'd prefer to move Kerfoot
Yeah.
definitely than Engvall because Engvall's played consistently over Kerfoot this season.
It's been
But I
good.
think if there was no takers for Kerfoot or Hall, which I don't think should be the case, Engvall might be a guy who has to go.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, overall, I mean, I'm very excited to see this team play. And the great thing is, we get 2 games before the trade deadline. We get Wednesday in Edmonton and then Thursday in Calgary,
Yeah.
and we'll get to see the Dubas will get a little bit of a run. I imagine that Sheldon Keefe's probably going to play around with the defense pairings. I think that's going to be really interesting to see who comes out of the lineup for Lafferty, one, and two, who comes out of the lineup for McCabe. Because I think depending on who that may be, may indicate where Toronto may be leaning.
Yeah.
Although to be fair, maybe they keep Kerfoot and Hall in the lineup just to showcase their value heading into
Oh,
the
that's a
deadline,
good point,
right?
actually. I didn't think of that.
If Kerfoot and Hall play well against Calgary, right? Kerfoot gets like a goal. Maybe they put him up on the second line to try Ryan O'Reilly on the third line. They move Kerfoot up just to try to boost his value. He scores 2 goals on Calgary, and Calgary goes, oh, you know what? Maybe we'll give up a second round pick for this guy. Okay, maybe that's wishful thinking, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, if you're playing with if you're playing with like Marner, then you get 2 goals go off your back, and it wouldn't have to do anything. So yeah, that's an option. Or the other option is both. You see both Kerfoot and Hall, or one or the other, come out of the lineup for these two new players, and then you pretty much know that these two guys are going to get traded. So that's also an option.
Yeah,
It's we'll figure out in 2 days. I'm really excited. But man, it's been a really good lead up to the deadline so far, and we still have a couple days left.
I still can't believe that all these trades have happened and it's not even the day before the trade deadline.
Yeah,
We have more like Patrick Kane's gonna get traded this week, right?
yeah,
Luke Shen's probably gonna get moved this week. We probably know Kerfoot's gonna get moved. Like, what other trades are gonna come out of nowhere? Like, we didn't even know Tanner Jeannot was gonna get moved until literally yesterday. It happened. It happened in the span of like 5 hours. We found out that Jeannot might be getting moved. 30 minutes later, we find out Tampa is making a pitch for him, and then an hour after that, it's like Tampa got him.
yeah. It was quick,
That just
right?
came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and Shay made a great video on that. It's something completely new. I really liked it. So,
Oh yeah, make sure to check that out.
all right, think that's everything. Um, Obviously, if any other trades come up, we'll be back. It's actually been really fun to get back into the swing of things and talk about hockey because it's been a while since we've been this active, and I really liked it. Um, but yeah, that's everything for me.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks again for watching, guys.
All right, and we will see you in the next video or deadline. Whichever one comes.